Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship by Venture for Canada. Venture for Canada is a national charity on a mission to foster the entrepreneurial skills and mindsets of young Canadians. Our vision is a Canada where young people can equitably realize their entrepreneurial potential to help build one of the most prosperous entrepreneurial ecosystems in the world.
On today's episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship, we're going to be diving deep into the theme of resilience, a concept at the very heart of entrepreneurial spirit. My name's Jennie, and I have the joy of leading our marketing and partnerships team here at Venture for Canada, and I'm super excited to be your guest host today as we uncover the dual paths of building resilience both through our personal and professional lives. On today's special episode, we're piecing together a compilation of stories, insights, and strategies on resilience, drawing from our inspiring conversations with podcast guests over the years. Starting all the way back in Season 3, we're joined by Danièle Henkel, the founder and president of Les Entreprises Danièle Henkel Inc., as she shares insights from her episode on resilience and trusting oneself. Moving ahead to Season 6, we're joined by Sukhinder Singh Cassidy, CEO at Xero and a leading entrepreneur, board member, and investor in the tech ecosystem, as she shares her insights on smart risk-taking. Lastly, we're joined by John Ruffolo, founder and managing partner of Maverix Private Equity, who enriches our dialogue with insights from his Season 7 episode on fostering self-discipline. More information about our guests and direct links to their podcasts will be available below in the podcast description. Now, before we hear from our guests, I wanted to share a bit more about what resilience means to me. In 2023, resilience became my word of the year. It was a year marked by grief after a close personal loss in my family, navigating change, moving through ebbs and flows of mental health, and embracing my ADHD diagnosis as a superpower rather than a weakness. Resilience guided me through the year and allowed me to peel back layers to discover more of my authentic self and transform my narrative from one shadowed by grief and shame to one radiating with strength and joy. To me, resilience is about more than just bouncing back. It's about finding your footing in a shaky world, seeing the opportunity in every challenge, and discovering and surprising ourselves with the strength that we find in our most challenging moments. I always like to think of life as a giant book. Each day, month, or year is a new chapter. Some sentences filled with what I like to call pure joy moments, PJMs for short, others with pure darkness. But together they all contribute to the narration of a bigger story, a story that's uniquely ours. And it's in navigating through these moments and these stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that I believe resilience is formed. So as we dive into this episode together, I invite you to reflect on the chapters of your own life. Whether you're seeking joy in a moment of darkness, or you're on the brink of turning the page to a new adventure, let's explore how resilience can be your guide. Join us as we listen to our guests share their resilience journeys, the strategies they've built, and how you too can emerge as a more resilient version of yourself in 2024 and beyond. Let's dive in.
Well, first of all, when you read my bio, the short bio, you said, and I will remind the audience that when you live in a Muslim country and your mother is Jewish and she's not married, so no protection whatsoever. She's a businesswoman and she has a little girl. So what my mother decided to do, because my father passed away before I was born, so she raised me on her own. And she decided, for the reasons are hers, to baptize me Catholic. And so the only thing I knew until the age of 14 is that I was Catholic. So I would go to the church, and at the age of 14, something happened. Something where it was kind of very drastic in my life. Actually, it's I would say that the woman that I am today probably started that day. Everything that I decided to become and to overcome started that day at the age of 14. My mother was in a business partnership with a man. He was Moroccan. And one day she woke up, I went to school, and she found him dead in the premises, in the business. So of course, my mom was arrested, my mom was accused, and my mom was tortured. So for 3 days, I, the little girl of 14 years, was looking for her mom without being able to find her. So that, why I'm mentioning that date, it's because that, like I said, started the entire way for me to see people and life. My mother was always protecting me. She said that I was capable of doing everything, that I was absolutely wonderful. She kept saying those things. And at that moment, I didn't know if I had to be very upset towards my mom or bless her because she protected me for 14 years. So North Africa for me taught me many things, especially in the relationship field. I discovered that I had probably at that time two choices. The choice to become a very bad person because of the rage, because of the injustice that my mother went through, because she was Jewish, because she was a woman, because she had no one to defend her, or to try to use the most important thing to grow and to protect her, education. So I started being interested in many things, many fields. I started observing human beings, the way they were talking, the way they were acting. So with whatever we have, which is we have everything when we want to develop the values, but also the tools that are given to us. I grew up and I became at a very early age, the mother of the mother.
John, thanks so much for coming on the podcast this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Scott.
So, John, several years ago, you were hit by a tractor trailer while biking outside of Toronto. And your recovery from the incident has been both very remarkable and incredibly inspirational, I know, to myself and to so many others. What did you learn about fostering resilience from this experience?
Well, Scott, first of all, I learned that no one should go through my experience, to understand the value of resilience and persistence. But what it actually did for me is it sort of went full circle for me. So I had a long history of investing in early stage and later stage startups. And when people asked me what was the single thread, if there was one, that was common to the investments that you made, and my answer was and still is the individuals had a similar characteristic of persistence, resilience, and adaptability. Because whenever you're building a business, I don't care how well you plan, you will 99.99% of the time be faced with crushing obstacles. And these are unforeseen obstacles, and it's going to be your ability to be so passionate that you will find a way to get around the obstacles and still continue moving on towards your goal. And what my accident, unfortunately illustrated to me was even when you have physical uh, obstacles that come in your way like this, you do have a couple of choices to either pack it up and go home or to find a way to get around those obstacles. And so to me, again, although this was not the way I wanted to illustrate it, um, uh, I was living the principles of how I was investing.
That's why you want to take small and medium and bigger size risks. I mean, by the way, some of them are going to work out. You just don't know which ones, right? But it is absolutely the case that when you put stressors on a system, you put life in perspective and you gain resilience. Does anybody go into any situation wanting stressors? Maybe the most grueling among them, us, but it's not like I go into every situation hoping for failure. It's just that, to your point, having now encountered a lot of different outcomes after taking a lot of different risks, my capacity to endure stress, or even just to look at a stressor and put in perspective, is, I think, fundamentally different than somebody who, to your point, makes only one move. I mean, I think that is, in some ways, I would say to people, the next most risky thing to taking no moves while the world surges ahead of you and things keep changing. Like, the biggest risk is staying static. The next biggest risk, in my mind, is making one move and just hoping it works out. Like, I'm like, that's just, if you think like one move, is meant to work, that's called extreme luck. If you want to be skilled at it, you keep taking multiple risks and making multiple choices and getting smarter as you go.
Reflecting on the insights that Danielle, John, and Sukhinder shared with us today, I think it becomes clear that resilience manifests so differently for each and every one of us. And our stories of resilience are deeply personal and powerful. But there's something that each of our guests touched on that I think really stuck with me and also serves as a common thread through all of our episodes. And that's this idea that at its core, resilience is all about choice. It's about recognizing that we always have a choice in our lives and we're always in control of our lives, as much as it often feels as though we're completely powerless in a world that's changing so drastically around us. But really, we do have this choice about how we're showing up each day for ourselves, for others, how we're choosing to view challenges and quote unquote failures as either setbacks or opportunities for growth and learning and reflection. It's choosing to have a victim mindset and a fixed mindset, or to move into a place of having a growth mindset and a creator mindset. We also have the choice to let these tough and negative emotions in our life, like anger and rage, the way Danielle spoke about, or shame, guilt, regret, victimhood. We have this choice to let these emotions take over our lives and, drive in the driver's seat. Or we have the choice to face challenges with, more of an open mind and an open heart, more understanding, acceptance. And I think a big one is compassion towards ourselves and to others. And especially, the way we speak to ourselves during challenges. Are we choosing to be our own worst critic? Or are we choosing to be as supportive and loving to ourselves in our own self talk as we would be with our close friends and family? So, what is resilience? I think it's far more than just enduring these tough times. It's about making active decisions and choices that shape our journey, choosing to embrace a growth mindset, facing challenges with creativity, resourcefulness. It's about persistence and adaptability, as John spoke about. It's navigating through physical, mental, spiritual obstacles with determination, flexibility, and involves taking risks or micro risks, as Sukhinder talked about, and stepping out of our comfort zones to learn and grow. And most importantly, I think it's about reflection and taking the time to look back and understand our choices, our experiences, and apply those lessons moving forward. So, next up, we're going to dive into some actionable strategies from our guests on how we can build more of that resilient mindset. I always like to think of these new strategies as just another tool in your toolbox. So the next time you're facing a challenge, hopefully you'll have another tool or two to draw from. With that, let's hear from our guests.
The interesting part about being resilient is resilience also means that once you smack your face into the wall and an obstacle comes, you need to know what direction you're going to go next. And you get your adaptability hat on. You try to look at, do you go left, right, up, down, around? How do I get around it? And but I you gotta know where you're going, because if you don't know where you're going and you go around the obstacle, how do you know that you just got closer to your end game? And being resilient, and but not knowing and not having the discipline of knowing where you're going is going to drive you in a circle. And so, I have seen lots of very resilient people, but they're not focused in knowing their end game. And so you're absolutely right. You really got to have the two together, um, and combine that discipline of the ultimate destination.
This framework in your book is, you talk about building one's risk taking muscles kind of over time. What's advice that you have for a young person on how to gradually build the systems and habits so that they can become a smarter and more effective risk taker?
Um, I think there are a few things here that I would think about. Number one, I think that when you think about a risk-taking muscle, the core thesis of the book is really that risk-taking, to get its benefits, you have to take multiple risks because you want to become a smart risk taker. And as we said, like, you unlock possibility through small and bigger choices. It's not just one big choice. It's about the series of sort of choosing, responding to the learning or the success you just had, and choosing again. I'll say to people, what if I told you that between you and the reward you imagined is not one choice, but probably 100 choices? Then you might just, prioritize getting in motion, right? So I always say to people, if you want to do that, you've got to build your risk muscle. So find small reasons to take risk every day. And we all have opportunities to take risks today. Like, I can guarantee in your current job, you have an opportunity today to take a micro risk to have more impact. Like, that's one of the reasons to take risk. You have an opportunity to probably take a micro risk to learn something new. You probably have an opportunity to take a micro risk to discover, something that you're curious about. Those are all the kinds of risks we can take today. And, like, when you take small risks, you're not as invested in the outcome if it fails or succeeds. You're probably more attuned to just getting the learning, but you're also building your muscles, right? Because you don't know which one of those moves might unlock, more opportunity or impact.
One piece of advice that I've heard a few times that resonates directly with what you're saying is the importance of doing something every day that scares you a little bit. And obviously within safe kind of context, but I think it's a really important advice for a young person. And I think sometimes our education system and to some extent modern parenting like stigmatizes risk taking or stigmatizes falling. But the importance of saying, hey, try something new. And to somewhat a meta example is even this podcast. A year ago, I know about experience doing podcasts. I run a charity. And initially we started saying, hey, let's interview a few of our Venture for Canada alumni and just kind of try it out and learn. And over the course of this year, we've done around 50 different interviews with starting with kind of a lower stakes people who are new and were Venture for Canada fellow alumni, and then progressively interviewing people who are more and more senior and prominent in their careers. And there have been hundreds of little risks as we have developed this podcast over time. But I really want to emphasize the importance for young people is think each day about what are little risks you can take. And ultimately, it's these risks compound, which is, I think, one of the things you talked about.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. Yeah, they absolutely do compound. I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head, right? The core thesis to unlock any large reward is not about one risk taken. It's about multiple, and it's about just being in a virtuous cycle of risk taking, learning, and reward, or failure and learning. It doesn't matter, right? You're just compounding your choices in order to unlock what we call this bigger outcome. But along the way, you've got to unlock a lot of smaller outcomes. There is no big outcome without smaller outcomes. There are no smaller outcomes without small choices or big choices, but iterative choices. So it's so interesting that people overweight one choice as if it's what sits between them and success, when often it's this iterative capacity to just keep taking risks and learning.
It's more about really systems, to your point, about creating like a system for taking little risks and
learning from them. Yeah, absolutely. Try and unlock impact. I always say to people, take a risk, try and unlock some impact, learn what happens. Then take another risk, try and do the same.
One line that you said that stuck with me is that becoming friends with fear, which I think is important for entrepreneurs and also just we live in probably one of the most uncertain times for a long time. What advice do you have for people in terms of to lean into that fear and to really become friends with fear?
Fear is an emotion, Scott. It's something that we feel. It's not something that is always real, can be real, but fear is an emotion that we feel before something. So it's a feeling that you get somewhere. It could be here, it could be in your throat, it could be anywhere. And the idea is like, it's just a signal of something that, I wrote a book called The Intuition. So it's your intuition that is telling you something is not right, or maybe it's your perception. So of course, fear, I say it is my best friend because fear has helped me to actually even save my life in certain times. But fear became my friend when I recognize fear, meaning I accept the fact that as a human being, fear is part of my life, is part of everyday's life. There are major fear and smaller ones. But when you look at them and you ask the question, why do I feel this way? You stop. You either run for your life because this is what you need to do, or you stop and you just observe what's going on around. Take the time to stop and know or try to understand, why do you have this feeling? Why your heart is beating faster? Why? Sometimes you will see something that you need to act, and some other times it's just a way to say, wait a minute, I haven't seen clearly. I need to go back and do my homework again. Fear is always a trigger to do something better. It's a friend. It's not an enemy. Not for me. It's my best friend, actually. And you know what? What I learned too is that fear is going to be with us our entire life. When we're born, we cry as a baby. It's the fear of coming into life. And when we're ready to go, fear of the unknown again. So I made fear my friend, and I speak to her every day. And I thank her sometimes, and sometimes I tell her to go to sleep because it's not the right time. So my advice is, try to know, or actually know, really know, that as a human being, you are in power.
So, as we recap these strategies, I think a few key takeaways really stood out for me. And first and foremost, going back to John's reflections, I think it's really important for us to always be reflecting on our lives and to objectively be looking inward and asking ourselves and checking in with ourselves on what is our direction, what is our north star. And I think some really helpful journal prompts that I've found sometimes for checking in is what values are non-negotiable in my life, or when have I felt most aligned with my purpose, or when have I felt most authentically myself, and what was I doing. So using this North Star can help us guide our decision making and our risk taking each day. And I think that leads us really nicely into Sukhinder's takeaway as well, um, which is, challenging ourselves each day to take these micro risks that align with that direction and that North Star that John spoke about. And, challenge ourselves to do hard things. And I think adding on to that is also, how can we prove to ourselves that we can do hard things? Not just challenge ourselves, but really prove to ourselves. And that's something I've been working on a lot myself this year. And what really makes um, you resilient is being able to shed any kind of limiting beliefs that you've held in your life that tell you that you aren't capable of something. And that's where fear comes from a lot of the time. And whether that's social conditioning or what we've been told by, the people in our lives, from childhood to present day, and that compounding narrative over time, those are those limiting beliefs that have been ingrained in our subconscious to say, you can't do it, and it's fear signaling to you saying, this is the unknown. This is out of your comfort zone. But the bottom line is, you know, you can't do it. And that's that narrative and that inner critic and that voice in your head. And so I think it's really proving to yourself that you can do hard things, and then proving that voice wrong inside your head. And finally, back to Danielle's point about embracing fear as a friend. I love the way she put that. And, embracing fear as a catalyst for personal growth rather than an obstacle that's hindering our progress, and rather than an enemy that's holding us back. So, three really great takeaways from all three of our guests. I think one thing I'm reflecting on after thinking about these strategies, and I'm reflecting with a smile on my face over here, is I just recently got back from a 1 month solo trip to Colombia, which was a trip I've been wanting to do for quite some time. And thinking back to, what Sukhinder was saying about taking risks, I remember what it felt like when I first, committed to the trip and I first booked the trip. And it, felt like one big risk at the time. And just saying, yes, I'm doing this. And, continuing to tell friends and family, I will be okay as a solo female traveler. And yes, I'm still going on this trip despite, what headlines you might be seeing in the news and any kind of stigma that has been upheld through various historic events or news headlines. And I really wanted to prove. I wanted to go down there to prove to myself that I was capable of planning and going on this trip as a solo female traveler, but also to prove others wrong and to showcase the beauty of the people and the culture, the land in Colombia. And it was just so incredible, the trip. But you know that was just one risk at the very beginning that felt so big. And of course, as Sukhinder mentioned, there's so many hundreds of micro risks that were involved, between planning and arriving and throughout the whole trip. But one thing I'm remembering in particular that has me smiling and thinking to Danielle's point about fear, I remember at one point I was in a town called Guatape, and it's the most colorful town in Colombia. And I was heading over to the dock for what I thought was going to be a group boat tour I could sign up for. And I get there and they're telling me, "Oh, you're okay to go out on the boat by yourself and drive the boat by yourself." And I'm thinking, I don't have a boating license, don't have a driver's license. And they're telling me, no, no, it's fine. We'll, teach you in Spanish and you're good to go. And in my head or in my gut, I could feel the fear. And I was, thinking, is this fear my intuition telling me this is a bad idea? Or is this actually a signal for me that this is a good idea and I should embrace the fear and take this as a challenge and opportunity? So ultimately, I ended up going out on the boat and it would have cost me only 20,000 pesos to have, one guide come with me on the boat, which in hindsight is not a lot of money in Canadian dollars. But, I wanted to embrace the fear and going out solo on the boat and, embracing fear as my friend. And I learned how to drive the boat in Spanish, checked that off my bucket list. And I went out there and I was driving this boat in circles in the middle of this lake for so long and just laughing to myself. And eventually, I got the hang of it and it was beautiful. It was sunset and I ended up having a lovely ride by myself. But I just remember smiling from cheek to cheek and just thinking, wow, there's no greater joy than overcoming a fear. And so just really thinking back to what Danielle mentioned, I think for me, that was a moment of embracing fear as a friend. And so to summarize these takeaways again, I think it's again knowing, what that North Star is for you. How can you challenge yourself to do hard things and also prove to yourself you can do hard things? And how can you embrace fear as your new best friend? Maybe not best friend, but how can you embrace fear as a friend and as a constant that's going to be with you throughout your life? In this next segment of the podcast, we're going to dive into some final words and pieces of advice from our guests on how you too can emerge as a more resilient you in 2024. Let's dive in.
As I said, there are multiple ways we can try and be a smart risk taker. And one is about not just thinking about, who we are and what our goals are, but when evaluating choices, identify where there are macro forces that can accelerate your chances of success or probabilities of success. And so tailwinds or headwinds are sort of like maybe observable characteristics that favor, and give momentum to a choice you're considering. So let's say you're looking at a company. It's about what industry is it in? Is that industry growing or not growing? Is the company growing or not growing? Is the division you're joining growing or not growing? If you look at the next 10 years, is it likely to be more favorable to that area or less favorable? Inside of a company, are you joining a group that has, increasing momentum and leadership? These are the types of questions to ask yourself, because as we think about when we're a smart risk taker, risk taking and finding success is not just all about us. It's us in concert with the environments that we enter. And so you want to give yourself, in some cases, some of the best chances for success. The converse is also true, that if you identify an area and it has tailwinds, that also, presents learning opportunity. Maybe you're going to enter a more challenged business, but they're willing to give you more responsibility. Well, that's also setting yourself up for success in a different way. It's giving you outsized learning. But that's about taking advantage, of, let's say, a headwind situation and trying to figure out what is your outsized opportunity in a more challenging situation.
What advice do you have for young people on how to be more resilient and to not avoid productive conflicts, like in essence, disputes, or not disputes, but tough conversations that need to be had, but rather to face those conversations head on?
So this is a an interesting question, and one that I'd say uh, I've developed me personally over time. Um, and I don't know when or why I did it, but it evolved in that uh, I discovered I was personally better off telling the truth and being much more binary with the truth than to skate in the middle. And it's and when I was quite uh, uh, specific, I found that I ended up with deeper and more meaningful relationships. It's no different. Again, if any of you folks follow my LinkedIn posts, I like to think, and I did it again more by accident than design. I call out where I see bullshit in the corporate world. I just did this on Disney. I did this on, Bank of Nova Scotia when they had their fiasco, but FTX, and it goes on. I'm not doing that to be salacious or to like. I'm not a media personality, so I'm not trying to get likes, but it frustrates me when I see inauthenticity. So either you are going to like me or you're going to hate me. And frankly, I don't care. Hey, they're ones I'm not looking to be liked. But I hope you would say, all right, but that's the truth, and there's not an agenda on there. Because what I find when you're in the middle and act like milk toast and don't, you know, have an opinion on something, then you know what? No one cares what you have to say. And that is to me the worst possible world you can be in. And so that's the same kind of scenario that I say that when you're dealing with fellow workers or employees, don't be in the middle. Take a stand. And sometimes, will they hate you? Yes, they will. Move on with your life, but they will. But the ones that matter will love you and trust you. And those are the ones that really create value for your organization.
What advice would you give to your 22-year-old self?
If you make a decision, if you have confidence and you move forward, and it is not what you thought it could be, it is okay because it was meant to be like that, because that's the way we learn. So we need to keep reminding ourselves that if we base our decision on our own values and they're strong enough, always trust yourself first, but have humility to learn, to listen, and to be guided by better than you. No matter who you are, no matter how great you can be, always be humble.
As we conclude our journey on resilience today, a heartfelt thank you to our guests and to you for joining us on this special episode. Always remember, within you lies the strength to make change, take risks, and embrace fear as a friend. Remember that your quote-unquote failures, challenges, or periods of darkness in life will allow you to experience the feelings of joy and gratitude so much stronger. With that, make sure you continue to nurture your resilience, challenge, and prove to yourself that you can do hard things, and let your entrepreneurial spirit shine bright. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week on a new wave of entrepreneurship.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Stay connected with us via our socials and through our email list. And be sure to subscribe to us in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss our next episode. Have feedback on today's episode? Let us know directly in the app. Thanks again for listening and for joining the new wave of entrepreneurs. Till next time.